Welcome back to It's Not Normal, the podcast, episode 7. Today, we're going to be talking about why narcissists are obsessed with control and how and why they foster a sense of dependency. When I was 21 years old, I'd like to preface this by saying that I'm a massive Imagine Dragons fan. I have been since I was in high school. I remember the first time I ever saw them perform was at an award show on TV. And I was like, oh my God, I have to see these people live. And so I've been to their first tour and every tour since, and I am obsessed. So they were touring the year I turned 21. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy myself a birthday present. I had met Dan Reynolds briefly at a film festival earlier that year. And I was like, I'm just going to go all out. I worked really hard this year. 21's a big one. I earned it. I deserved it. I'm going to buy myself like the whole VIP experience, meet and greet, get a ticket in the pit. It was going to be a whole thing. And I was really excited about it. So I buy myself this ticket and, I tell my parents that I'm buying myself this for my birthday. And they buy my little sister a ticket so that she can come with me. And it was great. Like the day of, my sister and I, we wake up, we pick out our outfits, we make our little quick check stop. We got the windows down and we're listening to like our pre-made Spotify playlist of the set list from that, so we're ready for the show. And it was great. It was like a little girls' trip, a little girls' day. And so the place that they were playing was 3 hours away from where I lived. That was the closest stadium or location that they were playing at on that tour. And I didn't care because I love to drive. I love driving and I love Imagine Dragons. So 3 hours really wasn't that big of a deal. So my sister and I make the trip and we get there. I go and I do the whole meet and greet thing. My sister gets us a great spot in the pit right up on the barricade. And so now we're standing there probably about 30 minutes until the show is about to start. And so we take a picture of like our view from where we are and we send it to my parents, just to kind of show them like, we did the meet and greet. We're in our spot. Everything's good to go. Here's our view. So not long after that, I get a phone call from my parents and they're like, oh, there's a live cam online, like streaming, and we're watching it. So turn around and wave your hands up in the air so we could see if maybe we can spot you. And so, not for a second did I think like, why would there be like a free live cam streaming like a paid concert outside? Completely went over my head. And so we're on the phone with them and we're like describing to them where we are, like in relation to the stage. We're like waving our hands up in the air. And, they said that the camera was towards the back of the crowd. So we were turned around towards the back of the crowd, just like waving our hands. And so I don't see any camera and they're like, oh no, we can't see you. Keep going. And so I'm looking. And then as my eyes start to make their way down to like crowd level, I see two other people waving their hands up in the air. And one of them is on the phone and it's my parents. Now, my parents are not Imagine Dragons fans. The only time that they would have listened to Imagine Dragons is when I listened to Imagine Dragons and they were also present in the room or in the car. And I was like, oh, like you guys are here. Cool. Why? Like, what are you doing here? And so they said, first of all, I drove my dad's pickup truck, which he had driven tons of places. We had taken it tons of places as a family. This was like his daily driver, like his go-to. And they said, we just didn't feel safe enough. Like we didn't feel like the car was safe enough for, it to make the drive home. And we just weren't sure. And, God forbid anything happened. Like we just wanted to be here just in case. And, we just weren't confident enough in the truck that it was like, safe enough to really get you home. Okay. So now they said they drove all the way here in my car, which was no more reliable than my dad's car. It was literally like a Craigslist buy with 90,000 miles on it that I couldn't drive for the first 2 weeks because the transmission went. Like it had so many issues on its own. It was probably worse to take that out there. But, they said we bought our tickets right outside the venue because like they weren't even on sale online anymore. So they bought themselves 2 tickets on the floor of an Imagine Dragons concert, drove 3 hours away from home to sit through a 3-hour long concert, openers and all, just so they could drive home alongside of us. Now, when you're raised in a narcissistic family, most of the time, you can't fully just be yourself. There are a lot of sides of yourself or kind of parts of your personality that you have to subdue or kind of just not show too much because they may not be that agreeable to your parents, and you just never want to add fuel to the fire. And so you don't always feel free to just be yourself, to express yourself, and to kind of like lean into those different sides of your personality. And you don't often get opportunities to go off and do things on your own either. Because in a narcissistic family, independence and individuality aren't encouraged. It's the opposite. And so on the rare occasion that you get to go out and do something on your own, you can breathe. You feel free. Like you can be whoever you want to be, and you can let all of these parts of yourself and these sides of your personality, you can just let them all go. You don't feel like anyone's watching you or judging you. You can just kind of be in the moment and be free. And it's such a wonderful feeling that children of narcissistic parents don't often get to experience. And to have that taken from you without your consent, without your knowledge, and so suddenly is a total bummer. Like here I am, I was having a great day. I was feeling like an adult. I made the trip on my own. We stopped at a Quick Check. We got sandwiches. We parked the car in the right spot. We made our way. We got it. Everything that we had to do that day, we did it, and we did it well. I was feeling responsible and just really like myself. And now I'm fully aware that my parents are standing no more than 50 feet behind us, and they're going to sit through this entire concert just to walk us back to the parking lot and drive home alongside us just in case anything happens. And so you just kind of lose that freedom, and you become aware that your parents are there, and you start to feel like you're on a little bit of a time frame, and it's just a completely different experience than what I had anticipated, and even what it had started out as at the beginning of that day. And the reason that this makes me think of a narcissist's obsession with control is because my parents weren't fans of this band. I just don't think that they could deal with the fact that my sister and I were going to be doing all of this on our own. We were going to be that far away for such an extended period of time, and they weren't going to know, what we were doing at every moment. And so they couldn't grapple with that. And so instead they gave into it, and they made the 3-hour trip on their own without telling us, bought themselves tickets, and now we're going to sit through a 3-hour show of bands that they didn't even know, that they didn't even like, because they had to satiate that need for control. And thinking about it now, describing that feeling of having sort of a rare opportunity of going out and doing things on your own, just as an individual, having grown up in that kind of environment, there is such a freedom and a light that kind of comes along with it. And maybe, my parents didn't want us to experience that, because when you're out in the world on your own, you get a little bit of perspective of what life is like outside of your narcissistic family. And maybe a light would have gone off in our heads, maybe just a little bit, and we would have been like, wow, I really like this feeling. I want to do this more. I want to do more things on my own and independently. And I can, right? Because here I am, and I made the drive. I did all these things. I'm responsible. I'm at this point in my life where that's okay. And maybe they didn't want that. And maybe that thought or that feeling that, maybe this is going to happen, maybe this is going to lead to more of this, it just completely took them over, and they couldn't help but come there and be present in the moment with us. And, it makes me think of, because narcissists need control. They crave control. And as soon as you start to deviate from what they want you to do, they will do anything to maintain the control that they have over you. And it makes me think about when I bought my van. When I was 21, I want to say, I was getting really interested in van life. It was kind of becoming popular on all of my social media, And it was something that I was really interested in actually doing because I had always wanted to take a cross-country road trip. I dreamt about it. I had like a notebook with all these different stops that I wanted to make and the miles between them and like how long it would take to get there. And I really genuinely believed like this was going to be part of my future. And that was right around like now van life is becoming popular. And I'm like, this is so cool. Like I can buy a van and I can renovate it and I can travel in it. Like this is so awesome. So one day my dad comes across a van on Facebook Marketplace and he's like, oh, what do you think? Like, do you want to go look at it? And I was like, yeah, totally. So we drive down to Philadelphia. Now, I had previously lent my dad some money that he hadn't paid me back yet. And so we're looking at the van and, it looks good to me. It's super cool. And the guy was selling it for $900. Now, that was a little less than what I had lent my dad. But he says to me, like, what do you think? Do you want it? And I'm like, I think it's really cool. I think it's a great van. Like, sure. And so he's like, okay, how about this? Instead of me paying you back, I will buy you this van and it'll be yours. Like I will buy this van for you and it'll be yours. And, part of me was like, I'd rather just have the money, you know what I mean? So that I can do with it what I please. But I was also just like, okay, I feel like two things kind of like went into me agreeing to this. And the first was like, I'm a pretty easygoing person. I'm a very trusting person, probably to a fault, or at least I was. And so, when my dad was like, I was like, yeah, it's a little less. And, I'd rather just have the money, but it's like, I wanted a van. We're here. The van looks cool. So like, yeah, let's do it. And then I think there's also like a people pleasing aspect to it where like I am a people pleaser through and through, like to my core. And it's something that I still struggle with. And so I think in the moment, like he could have proposed anything and I would have been like, oh yeah, okay, like that's a good idea. Let's do that. Because when you grow up in a narcissistic family, you are conditioned over such a long period of time to just agree. That it's just easier and better to just agree. And so I was like, yeah, okay, this sounds good. So now we get the van back and we're taking care of all the paperwork. We're registering it. And my dad says that he's going to put his name on the title. And the reason for that was because I was under 25. I was an underage driver. And so if they were to put my name on the title, it would make the insurance go up. Okay, that makes sense. And like, I trust you, Dad, so sure, let's do that. I never once questioned his intentions, which was a mistake on my part. I learned later. So fast forward a couple months and I meet Brandon, my hubby. The first day that we meet, I take my van to the coffee shop where we, agreed to meet up. And I had been driving that van everywhere. I named him Milo, and I might refer to him as a him because I did when I had him. And so I was driving him everywhere, and I drove him the day that my husband and I met. So I drove him to this coffee shop. Brandon and I meet. We end up talking for hours and hours and hours. And he walks me out, and I'm like, you have to see my van. Because I was obsessed with it. It was a 1995 Chevy G20. It was green. It had a green, like a dark green velvet interior. The back seat was a futon, so it folded down to a bed. Like this thing was awesome. So, of course, I wanted to show it off, especially to, this new boy that I liked. And I was like, yeah, you have to come see my van. So he walks me over to my van and I'm showing him off, and I'm like, yeah, I'm planning on traveling in it. I want to take a cross-country road trip. And, in the moment, like when Brandon and I met, it was the best conversation that I had ever had with another human being, especially upon first meeting them. And so there was already like something happening there. And so I was like, yeah, like, you should come with me. And he was like, yeah, totally. And I think on the surface, like we were both half joking because it was like so ridiculous. Like we had just met hours before. But I think for both of us, like there was a level of like, no, but really, like I would, that was there. And so Brandon and I start dating, and very quickly we realized that like, yeah, we're going to be seeing a lot of each other. We're going to be spending a lot of time together, like probably the rest of our lives. And this was awesome because I had never met someone before who was as open-minded as me, who was so kind of willing to indulge in this alternative lifestyle, who was interested in van life and in traveling. And I was hesitant before I met Brandon to kind of road trip on my own, because I had only ever taken trips with my family along the East Coast. I never ventured west at all. And the idea to me of traveling alone for the first time as like a young girl in places that I didn't know, like I didn't know the ropes of traveling yet or road tripping yet. It was a little scary. And I also really enjoy company. Like I don't like being alone very much, and I thought like having someone along with me for the ride would make it that much more fun, you know, to experience all of these things together and to share all of these memories together would be awesome. So sure enough, Brandon and I are talking about it. I'm like, this is great. Like now I have someone who's interested in this. We can renovate it together. We can travel in it together. And it didn't take long for my parents to kind of connect these dots and at least realize that maybe this was a possibility. You know, maybe there was a possibility that Brandon and I were going to renovate Milo and hit the road at some point. And they didn't like that, obviously. The thought of me traveling with a boy, taking a road trip without them, having all of these experiences on my own as like an independent person did not sit well with them. So one day I am sitting at the kitchen counter in my parents' house and I'm eating breakfast and I'm getting ready to go to work. And I had asked my parents, I was like, oh, where are Milo's keys? Because they weren't where I left them. And they were like, why? And now I had told them this before, but I reiterated it again. I said, you know, I'm taking him to work today. And then after work, Brandon and I are going to take him to a mechanic, to like someone that we knew, so that we could get an honest assessment of the work that he needed. What did Milo need mechanically to make him safe enough to travel across the country? And they were like, oh no, he's so rusted underneath, like he is not safe to drive. Now, I had been driving Milo everywhere. I had taken him to work before. One day when I was driving my dad's truck during work, the transmission went while I was on the highway. And so he drove Milo out there to kind of like save me in the truck. And then I drove the van for the rest of the day and the following days because the truck needed to be fixed now. And it was just an excuse. It was just a reason for them to not let me drive the van so that I couldn't take him to a mechanic. Now, work for me, it was 15 miles from home. It was not a far drive. It was very straightforward. And like I said, I had driven the van before. So they took the keys. They hid them from me. They wouldn't tell me where they were, and they didn't let me take him to work that day. So I ended up taking my brother's car to work that day, and we got into a whole huge thing that morning, and they were yelling at me, telling me that I was immature and that I was acting like a child, all because I was upset that they took and hid the keys to my van. But in that moment, I realized that it wasn't my van. Even though it was paid for with the money that I was owed, my name was not on the title. And I was told that if I tried to find the keys and if I found them and if I drove the van and if I took him anywhere, that the cops would be called and that it would be reported stolen because my name was not on the title. And that, for me, was devastating. I, at one point, found the keys and very sneakily got duplicates made, which were then also taken from me. And I really lost the van, I think, that day. I ended up moving out and Milo stayed at my parents' house. The keys stayed there. And for the longest time, I was under the impression that he was just junked. But I later learned, at least I think, that he was sold to a family. I really don't know where the van ended up. And it was so upsetting to me because I was so excited about the future of this van and this project that I wanted to start and this journey that I wanted to go on. You know, this was something that I was looking forward to for a really long time, and it was just starting to become real. And to have something that was so positive and something that I don't know, I guess I was attached to it in a certain way, you know, because I saw so much of my future taking place, or at least starting, in this van, that to have it just kind of like ripped out from under you was absolutely devastating. And I just had to let it go. And so this aspect of control permeated and really dominated a lot of aspects of my life. And it did so in ways that I didn't even think to question. Like, they flew entirely under the radar, like went over my head. And I think the reason for that was because I didn't even know what narcissism was until after I moved out of my parents' house. And so I didn't understand the level of control or manipulation that was involved in my relationship with my parents. I always just kind of assumed the best of them or gave them the benefit of the doubt. I trusted them. And, from everything from me being on their phone plan or on their car insurance to any time I was going anywhere with my friends, them offering and following through with picking us up and dropping us off wherever we wanted to go, to, every single day being dropped off and picked up from high school. All of these things on the surface seem so kind and generous, like really nice things that my parents were doing for me that I knew not every other kid's parents did for them. And so I felt really grateful for a long time because I didn't question their intentions. But looking back, it's so crystal clear how there's such a duality to all of these actions, that there's a level of control that fueled so many of their decisions that I was completely naive to for the longest time. Yes, you're dropping me off and picking me up from high school every day, right? And I'm really thankful for that. But that also means that you're seeing where I get dropped off, who I meet up with when I get dropped off. You're picking me up, and so I don't have any time to mingle with my friends or to maybe meet new people. I don't get to just chat with people who are walking the same way as me. You pick up my friends, you see who I'm with, who you're picking up, you see where we're getting dropped off, you know what time we need to be picked up, so you know what time we'll be home. If I don't answer your messages on time, now I'm on your phone plan, so you have control over that too. And it's so strange to talk about these things in a negative light, especially if you've never experienced this kind of controlling relationship. But for those of you who have and who understand what a relationship with a narcissist is like, it makes total sense. All of these things on the surface seem really kind, and it makes it that much harder to deny them or to say no or to speak negatively about them in any way because you feel bad. You don't feel like you want to come across like a brat or like you're entitled or you're ungrateful. But it's important that you question the motives behind all of these things, because I did not. I was completely unaware of what was going on for the longest time. And that allowed my narcissistic parent to maintain such a high level of control over me and my life until I moved out. And the reason that a narcissist is obsessed with control, there are a million different reasons why a narcissist might be obsessed with control. Everything from low self-esteem and a lack of confidence to feeling, this certain sense of entitlement where they are the only person that matters and everything needs to go the way that they want it to go because they deserve that and they're entitled to that and nothing should deviate from that. But then there's this other possibility, which is the most interesting to me, and I would imagine is probably the case when it comes to most narcissists. Other people don't exist to narcissists. Everyone that surrounds a narcissist, they view as a reflection or an extension of themselves, or a means to achieve some kind of personal goal. And when you look at the relationship between a narcissistic parent and a child, when the child is really young and impressionable, it's really easy for the interests and the beliefs and the thoughts to align very closely with that of the parent. But as the child gets older, right, maybe enters into their teenage years and they're starting to explore and, try new things, they're like developing their tastes and their interests, they're evolving and changing. There's this departure that takes place that I think is really difficult for the narcissist to reconcile, because now these interests and these thoughts and these beliefs and maybe even what they're doing is deviating more and more from what feels true to the narcissist and what the narcissist wants. And that, I think, is why narcissists struggle so much with independency and with any sort of individualism, because how can that make sense if I like this thing and now all of a sudden you're doing this other thing? Like, that doesn't feel true to me. So like we have to squash that, You're not free to just explore and to experiment and to kind of engage with these other parts of your personality or these other aspects of your life that maybe you hadn't up until that point. And there are a number of techniques that a narcissist might employ to kind of maintain this level of control or to guide you back into a way of thinking that aligns more closely with their own. Everything from the silent treatment to guilt tripping to getting yelled at. And I think when your relationship with your parents, more often than not, is really unique for a significant period of your life, just because of how close it is. You're existing in such close proximity that, you're waking up and going to sleep under the same roof. You're sitting at the same table having your meals. And so I know for me, there were times when I consciously made decisions to do things that I knew would go over well with my narcissistic parent. Other times, there were things that I was doing or things that I believed in that, I was kind of like putting all of these things out there that weren't true to me. They were kind of just like subconscious decisions that I knew would go over well in my house. And I didn't realize that I was doing these things until months or years after I moved out. And I think the reason for that is because narcissists are so good at getting what they want, at emotionally manipulating the people that they're around. And when it is in a family setting and it's so close-knit and you're seeing each other every day, little by little, you can just kind of like chip away at these things until they feel completely normal and they just slide under the radar and go completely unnoticed. And like I said, that was the case for me when, there were times when I would consciously do it and I knew like, okay, I'm not going to ask to do this thing because I know it's just going to be met with a no and there's going to be an argument. So I'm just going to save myself everything and I'm just going to pretend like I don't really want to go. But then there were other times when it was more like a behavior or a way of thinking or a belief system that had been instilled in me over and over and over again over such an extended period of time that it felt completely natural. And I didn't even know that I was actively engaging in it until I was out of that environment for months or years even. One of the ways that a narcissistic parent maintains control over their kids is through fostering a sense of dependency. Independence, individuality, going out and doing things on your own is rarely, if ever, encouraged in a narcissistic family. And the reason for that is because if I can stand on my own 2 feet, if I can stand up for myself, if I know how to cook and clean and to save money, I don't need my parents as much. And the thing is, as you get older, as you're a teenager, 18, 19, 20, you're moving into adulthood, these are all perfectly normal things and things that should be encouraged by your parents. I know that if I had a kid and, they were entering into their like late teens, early 20s, I would be so proud to see them kind of flourish into a responsible person, to understand their responsibilities, to kind of take an interest in taking care of themselves and learning all of these new things so that they can be better prepared to go out into the world as an adult. And as a parent, I would imagine that you would want to prepare your kids to go out into the world because it's hard enough as it is, right? To be an adult in today's day and age. And at any point, taking on, there's such a shift that takes place. Like when you move out and you're living on your own and you've got a job and you're grocery shopping on your own, you're doing your own laundry, you're responsible for paying your own taxes. Like there are a million different responsibilities that you start to take on once you move into adulthood, that to have, these basic life skills kind of under control is only going to make you feel more prepared. It's only going to make the transition a little bit easier. And for me, I was never taught how to do my own laundry. I was never taught how to cook. I didn't have a credit card. I knew nothing about saving money. I was discouraged from getting a job when I was a teenager. And so the first way that I think fostering this sense of dependency is so damaging to kids is that it leaves them so unprepared and feeling like they're so much more behind than their peers. I was embarrassed. I learned how to do laundry for the first time when I was 21 years old, after I had moved out of my parents' house, and it was embarrassing. I don't understand why parents would want their kid to be dependent. why they would encourage that sort of dependency. And when you're younger, it's so easy, again, to just kind of like overlook these things or to look at them in a really positive light. Like, wow, okay, I don't need a summer job and like I don't have to do my own laundry. That's awesome. But when you look a little bit deeper and now you start to understand the motive behind all of this, it's not as pure as you once thought it was. And so now you're an adult and you're shouldering all of these new responsibilities that come along with moving out and adulthood. All the while you're trying to figure out how to do these really basic life skills that you should have been taught 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And it can be so much to handle. It can be so overwhelming at times. Not only figuring out the tasks themselves, but that sense and that feeling of just being behind. Like everyone else around you is leaps and bounds ahead of you, and now you're constantly just playing this game of catch up. But it's so important to be patient with yourself because it is a lot on your plate all of a sudden. And you know, for me, I was being exiled from my family, all while learning how to do my own laundry and cook chicken. And now I'm also, you know, paying for my own phone. I have my own phone plan and I have to figure out how that works, you know, and car insurance. Like all of these things that should have kind of been introduced to me in a healthy, positive way were things that I was doing on my own and sort of like in spite of my parents. And it made it that much more difficult. And so I feel like you just have to remind yourself through that process that you're going to get there. It's okay. You know, you weren't really given much of a head start. And so just forgive yourself for that and be patient. You will get there in time. And I think the other way that this is so damaging, and this is kind of like a personal experience to me, is that for the longest time, I equated love with control. And this was one of those subconscious things that I think was just sort of instilled in me. I didn't know that I was consciously making this decision or that this, you know, it wasn't something that I was aware of until I was in my first romantic relationship with my husband. Growing up in such a controlling environment and receiving that kind of, or I guess experiencing that level of control from the same people who brought you into this world, who are putting food on the table and a roof over your head, who are telling you that they love you and they're showing you that they care about you by, you know, showing up to your softball games or helping you with a school project. For those things to exist so closely, for me, that became the way that I interpreted love. And I didn't realize this until, like I said, when I met my husband and, you know, if I would tell him like, oh, I'm going out with my friends, and he would just say like, oh, okay, have fun. I was devastated. I was like, why do you not want to know where I'm going or who I'm going with or what time I'm going to be home? Like, do you want to come with me? Maybe invite yourself along. Like, do you not care about me? And I remember having this realization. I remember exactly where I was and just being like, oh my God, like I am doing this because of that. And it all started to make sense where growing up in an environment where dependency is preferred. And, you know, anytime I would tell my parents that I was doing something or I was going somewhere, I would be questioned. That's what I would be met with. Where are you going? Who are you going with? It borderline interrogation. And so to get that from the same people that, you know, when you grow up, like when you're a kid, I don't think any kid wants to have a bad relationship with their parents. You know, I always gave them the benefit of the doubt and I trusted them. I never questioned their intentions. And so I believed for the longest time that we just had this pure, loving, caring relationship, that there were no sort of ulterior motives. There was no manipulation going on. I never even thought to question it. And so when you're under that belief and you're also receiving love from these people, but at the same time, they're maintaining such a high level of control over you, these two things kind of start to go hand in hand. And so it took me a really long time to realize like the way that I was interpreting love was through control. If I told my husband that I was going out somewhere with, you know, a friend of mine, there was part of me that wanted him to not want me to go. And it's because control to me meant love. If you were controlling me, that meant that you cared about me and that you really loved me. And if you instead were fostering any kind of independence or individuality, I viewed that as a negative where, you know, do you not want me around? Like, did I say or do something that maybe upset you? Are you annoyed by me? Like, do you want some time away from me? That was where my head was. And it makes sense now, but you know, it's something that I still struggle with. I still struggle to do things on my own or to want to do things on my own and to really kind of lean into that. But I think just existing in that kind of controlling environment for such a long period of time, on top of dependency really being encouraged and almost like rewarded, it can be incredibly confusing and it can be really difficult to separate those two things and to not carry them on in future relationships in your life. So, oh man, what a topic this was. I guess I would want to wrap this up just by saying, you know, I'm almost 5 years in to this healing journey, 5 years since I moved out of my parents' house. And there are still things that I struggle with. You know, things that I've had these realizations maybe years ago, right? And I've put some practice in to kind of work against them. But existing in that environment for so long makes these things feel like almost intrinsic to you. And it's important to remember that they're not. They're learned behaviors that you can unlearn and you can teach yourself new behaviors. And I want to stress how important it is to be patient with yourself, because growing up in a narcissistic family is a really strange, oddly specific thing, and it can permeate so many different aspects of your life moving forward. It's a lot to unpack, and it's not going to happen overnight, and there are going to be times when you feel overwhelmed and you're just questioning absolutely everything that you've ever known, and that's a lot, all while becoming an adult, maybe, and being exiled from your family. So be kind to yourself, be patient, and you'll get there. That is about all the time that I've got for this episode today. I'm going to be diving into some of your comments over on Patreon so that we could get a little bit further into this topic. And in the meantime, I just want to thank everybody who's been watching my videos. If they've been helpful to you at all and you want to see me keep making them, maybe consider heading over to Patreon or TikTok series and supporting me on there. We've got emotional but hopeful t-shirts and sweatshirts all up on our website, which is linked down below. And even here on YouTube, just a simple like and subscribe goes a really long way. So again, thank you so much to everybody, and I will be back very soon with another episode of It's Not Normal.